Well, it's been a while since we've done a distribution review, but today we have something kind of special. This here is Zorin OS 15. It's been a while since we've taken a look at Zorin, but I will say this distribution is pretty great, so we're going to be taking a look at it right now on Linux Lounge. Now, the first thing I'd sort of like to give some attention to before we look at the actual distribution is just the website. As you see here, it's pretty great and it's very appealing, which to sort of a new user who might come across this, a good website is an absolutely fantastic thing to have, and as you see, they sell themselves very well. Mainly to new users, but that's kind of the whole point of Zorin, I suppose. You've got yourself it's pretty nice, and as you see here, Zorin at one point will actually be selling computers with Zorin OS, which actually I think as far as getting new users into Linux, OEMs should probably start shipping computers with Linux, and I think that's one of the major barriers to stopping, or rather that's one of the major barriers to kind of getting people into Linux. People don't know how to install it, but if OEMs start shipping it, well then people will get into Linux, which is fantastic. I also think that Zorin OS will make a great distribution for OEMs, which is, it's a simple enough distribution to use. It's quite traditional in the way it works, but we'll get onto that later. Also, a thing of note is that Zorin actually has a help section to help along new users, which all in all, Zorin OS really does sell itself to new users on this site, which is absolutely fantastic. And here we are at the Zorin OS desktop itself. Now, as you see, out of the box, it's got a very Windows-esque look, but we'll get more into that later. For some technical details, it's based on Ubuntu 18.04.2 long-term support, so this thing will be supported for many years to come. So if you're like a new user, or a new user, you can just install this and be done with it for quite sort of a long period of time, which is always great to see. Also, additionally, with it being long-term support and that, and of course with it being Ubuntu, it'll be quite stable as well. Also, with it being Ubuntu, any guide you find out there for Linux should also work on Zorin, or rather most guides out there will be written for Ubuntu. So my personal feelings about Ubuntu aside, it makes a great base for a user-friendly distribution. Another thing to note is that this uses a heavily modified version of the GNOME desktop environment, so maybe that's not for all the computers, but Zorin does offer a light version for such computers, which is great. Another thing to note that this is the core version of Zorin OS. There is an ultimate version as well. However, all the ultimate version really adds is, you get yourself a absolute load of pre-installed software, games, and you get yourself a few new desktop layouts, which some might consider it below, but I suppose if you want your system configured and ready to go the moment you install it, everything that you might want to do, well, maybe it'll be worth it for you. However, I will admit that I suppose a lot of work has gone into Zorin OS, there's no denying that, but the ultimate version is €39 or whatever that is in your local currency, which, I suppose, like I say, there is a lot of work that goes in it, but from my personal opinion, I think that that's a little bit steep. And what I would also maybe rather is, with it being like an open source project and that, I think a pay what you want model might be better. However, I suppose, compensating the developers for their hard work and effort is important, and the Zorin OS devs most certainly know what they're doing, so that's just my personal opinion. If you think it's worth it, you should probably go ahead and get the ultimate version to support the Zorin OS developers and the great work that they do. Now, to get into the distribution itself, I must say, out of the box, it looks absolutely fantastic. You've got yourself a nice theme, which is new to Zorin OS 15. And, you know, all in all, it really does look absolutely stunning out of the box. Nice wallpapers, nice theme, nice everything. Very much reminiscent of the sort of new Windows 10 Lite theme, which is, you know, I suppose for new users coming in, you know, if you can install this and at some time, you know, forget that it maybe even is Zorin OS or have it look familiar, that's always a good thing. And actually, I do kind of think that the Windows 10 Lite theme does look pretty great. Now, as for, you know, your installed programs, which is kind of one of the more important things with a distribution, I think Zorin OS does a very good choice with, you know, or makes some good choices in terms of installed software. You know, you've got yourself some nice accessories, you know, some games which, okay, fair enough, that's not a bad inclusion, they're not taking up much space. You've got yourself some graphic tools, a full image editor, document viewer, you know, scanner, got yourself a web browser, and I don't believe I have heard of this program. Let's find out what it is. I see you got yourself a remote desktop client, which is cool to have. You got yourself some, you know, document tools. LibreOffice, a full office suite out of the box, which is always nice to have. What's cool about this as well, Zorin have kind of, well, they haven't really modified LibreOffice so much as they've kind of changed the default UI to the more ribbon style thing, which I personally prefer the sort of more traditional Office suite design. However, if you're coming over from Windows, having used like WPS Office, Microsoft Office, whatever, this will be sort of more what you're used to. So, you know, it's always nice to have. You know, your default web browser is Firefox, which it's not a bad choice, but maybe for new users, you know, maybe they'd prefer Chromium. However, Chromium's incredibly easy to install, so that's not a problem. You know, you've got yourself a disk burner, webcam suite, and this is kind of cool. You get out of the box PitV, which is a video editor. And actually, I don't know about including a video editor. Like, okay, fair enough, maybe Windows did it for like quite a long time with Movie Maker. But I suppose if you need to cut some together some clips, you know, there's no finer choice than PitV, because something like Kdenlive would of course be too complicated for this purpose. You've got yourself the sort of, I assume that's the sort of default, that's Totem for your video player. Now, maybe something like GNOME MPV or VLC would be a better choice, but fair enough, it plays videos. In your settings, you've got some, you know, Zorin programs down here, but we'll get into those later. You've also got a software center, which I believe is GNOME software, so which is, you know, very easy to install programs with, and I believe it's what Ubuntu uses by default too. And you've got yourself some utilities. Now, this is where Zorin starts to get really interesting and kind of separates itself from the crowd, because kind of as long as Zorin has been around, it's been very easily configurable and has lots and lots of options, and this release is no exception. If we go ahead and open up the Zorin appearance. Now, as you see here, you've got yourself several layouts, but we'll get onto those later. And you've got yourself a few options for, well, a few other things. Now, the first thing to note is that you can in fact have icons on the desktop, which is something that you can't do with, say, you know, stock GNOME, which I think is an excellent inclusion because icons on the desktop are quite important. You've got a few options around here for that as well. So there won't be any sort of new users wondering why they can't put icons on the desktop. You've also got yourself several interface options. You can, you know, change where the title bar buttons are, which if you're coming over from Mac OS, maybe you'd be more comfortable with having on the left. And you can also enable and disable animations. Of course, they're not running here because this is a virtual machine, but on a real computer, they'd probably look great. And I guess that's kind of it for the desktop stuff, but the layout options, well, this has kind of been one of the main features of Zorin OS for kind of a while now. In fact, maybe even since it was made, but this is kind of nifty. You can kind of radically change the way your desktop looks with a simple click of the button. Now, the ultimate version comes with far more layouts, but in the core version you do get 3. The first one is sort of more conventional Windows, look and feel. The second one kind of adds, labels to the tile bars, and the third one is a touch layout, which is quite interesting. One thing to note, however, would be that occasionally I have had this crash in a virtual machine. However, as you see there, every time it has recovered. Maybe that wouldn't happen on real hardware. Even if it did, it still recovers and works absolutely fine. Now, by far the most interesting layout in the sort of core version is the touch layout. Now, essentially what this is, if you have, say, a laptop or other device with a touchscreen, this layout is supposedly kind of designed for it. And as you can see, it's sort of a lot more in line with what is offered with traditional GNOME. I also want to say this is kind of like has a sort of resemblance of Chrome OS. You got all your icons in the center and your usual menu stuff. And yeah, I mean, I'm not really sure if you'd want to be using, like, say, a full-blown Linux desktop on a normal x86 tablet without a keyboard or mouse, as programs that are optimized to be used like that are quite, sort of few and far between. But if you had a device that could do both, well, I suppose this would work to some extent. Additionally, I believe that maybe the devices that Zorin are shipping will have a tablet mode. It's possible. But personally, I would kind of just stick with the default Zorin layout. Another kind of cool thing about Zorin OS is that you can change the theme very easily. You can change the accent color. As you see, that kind of changes all of the icons and everything, which, by the way, the icons are very nice. I believe they're based on the Papyrus icon theme, which is kind of the most commonly used theme on Linux, with good reason, because it looks great. Also, additionally, beyond the accent colours, you can change it to a dark theme very easily. And now this is system-wide, unlike Windows 10's rather useless dark theme. And additionally, one final pretty cool thing is that you can kind of set the system to change between light and dark mode depending on the time. So think kind of like that new feature in macOS, which does much the same thing. Additionally, you can actually manually configure the themes and icons. So if you want to, for example, install your own themes, well, you can do that. So I suppose in a way this Zorin appearance tool is kind of like a simplified GNOME tweak tool. Additionally, you can change the font, and you've got several options regarding the panel, which is always nice. So it's pretty good. You can also change what the left super key does. So all in all, Zorin OS is a very configurable distribution for new users. Maybe it's not like sort of full-on hands-on control like you would get with a window manager or whatever, but for a new user, this is absolutely perfect if you want to customize things. And another neat thing that Zorin OS now has is Zorin Connect. Think of this as sort of being the Linux version of what Apple has with handoff and continuity. And what this is actually it's a fork of another Linux program called GS Connect, which is in itself a sort of fork of KDE Connect designed for GNOME. And I've been using this on my system for a while, and it's an absolute brilliant piece of software that is more powerful than anything even on Windows or Mac. And essentially what this will let you do is, as it says here, sync your phone's notifications, browse photos on your phone, send photos to your phone, which isn't listed here, send and receive text, share files, and use your phone as a remote control for your computer, which is kind of nice. And also what's kind of cool about this is there's the accompanying phone app is actually Zorin OS skinned. It looks very much like GS Connect, of course, but it does have that Zorin look, which is pretty nice. And as you can see, there's several reviews that kind of are very favourable, so I gather their fork of GS Connect works very well. And I suppose, you know, kind of all in all, that's pretty much it with Zorin OS, you know. It really does just work, which is absolutely fantastic for new users. If you haven't tried this already, even if you're more, you know, a more experienced Linux user, I would still give this a look because it's pretty great. And if you're a new user looking for a place to start in the Linux world, well, this distribution, I would give it, you know, kind of a high, it's a very strong recommendation. It's absolutely fantastic. But I suppose that's all I've got to say about it, really. Give it a go, give it an install. Thanks for watching this video, and I will see you in the next review.